Welcome to Issues and Answers with Diane Kinderwater. Issues and Answers is presented as a public service to inform, educate, and better the lives of New Mexicans. And now, Issues and Answers with your host, Diane Kinderwater.
Welcome to the program, and of course, Happy New Year to you and your family. We're still, of course, in this new year, and boy, have times changed, or are they going to be changing? We had an election just a couple months ago, and that means possibly big changes. What does it mean for us here in New Mexico? What does it mean to us as taxpayers? What does it mean to the future of our state, to the future of our country? Well, I don't really have a prediction, but I hope my guest does. He's Paul Gessing, the president of the Rio Grande Foundation, and he is here to share his wisdom, what he studied, what he knows, and what he believes and predicts might happen to us in 2025. We'll be back with Paul Gessing right after this. Stay with us. Welcome back to the program. I don't want to put my guests on the spot, but predictions. Or I could say resolutions. Do you have any resolutions? Do I have any resolutions? Well, this is the time to have them. And predictions. Paul Gessing, welcome. Happy New Year to you. Happy January, happy February, March. Our show is going to be airing a lot.
Yeah, great to be with you again.
So a lot of changes possibly are on the horizon or are here happening right now. Some things are maybe unpredictable, unexpected. What do you think? What do you think? We had an election, a new former president taking helm.
Yeah.
What do you think as the president of the Rio Grande Foundation?
Well, of course, President Trump is the first president to win, lose, and then win since Grover Cleveland did it in the late 1800s. That is unpredictable and unique. The federal and national scene is much more unpredictable than we are seeing in New Mexico, where it was basically a status quo election for New Mexico, or Democrat-controlled, blue as blue can be. Our congressional delegation, our legislature saw very, very minor changes. We have Michelle Lujan Grisham, our governor, finishing out her last 2 years in office. So she's kind of moving into that lame duck territory, and we'll see how her political power weathers that kind of transition from somebody who's in their full, political power versus somebody who's kind of starting to tiptoe their way to the door and be out of office because of the term limits that we have, 2 4-year terms for governor. Of course.
But as you said, the election here across the country, it's changed for the president and even the House and the Senate. But here in New Mexico, you said bluer than blue.
Exactly. And that is going to set up a potential difficult dynamic for New Mexico as it pertains to the Trump administration. Now, obviously, philosophical arguments, state versus federal, inherently going to have some arguments. But the question this time around with Donald Trump is that he has seemed to be much more serious about federal spending and reining in the federal government than he was in his first 4-year term. He's got people like Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy and the DOGE, if you will, the Department of Government Efficiency. Now, they're not elected officials. They're not even a part of the government. But how successful are they going to be? And what paths will they embark upon to address federal spending? Because New Mexico is one of the very most, if not the very most, reliant on federal money states in the country. Wow. Now, I personally think that clawing some of that back, pulling back on Washington spending would help New Mexico. We've also got the oil and gas industry, which continues to go. Sorry.
No, wow. Let's take these a little slower.
Sorry, yeah.
They're on top of your mind, but they're going, wow, that's a good point. The Rio Grande Foundation is a think tank where you believe in liberty, opportunities,
and prosperity.
Yes. And that's what you're looking for. Liberty, freedoms.
Opportunity for average New Mexicans to make a better life for themselves.
And the prosperity. Yeah. So the prosperity is what's been really tough on all of us with this, with the cost of living. I mean, it's tough.
Right.
So with this new federal administration, are we looking for, it's a change.
Right.
So could there be a little more prosperity?
I hope so and think so. I certainly align with a lot of President Trump's thinking on many issues, especially the federal spending side of things. One of the things I have concerns about is in terms of the tariffs and what impact that has. Also, of course, the immigration and how he works through deporting people who don't belong here, and whether he encounters legal issues and just philosophical and physical challenges to taking people and moving them out of the country, and what that does to the economy as well, depending on how things actually work out.
So, but the economy has been tough, unless you're in the stock market. Surprisingly, that hasn't fluctuated. You think with this uncertainty, at least when we're taping this program, hasn't been it's been going up and up and up.
Right.
But regarding our prosperity and the taxes we pay, because this is the time people are preparing their taxes to be paid to the federal government, state government, April 15th, this prosperity and how much we pay government,
right.
I think there might be hope, because we've all heard of the abuse of federal spending and getting people back to work. So there's a little bit of hope, possibly, that we do have now this new department to look into government efficiencies and overspending. That's got to be hopeful.
Absolutely. One of the things, and so obviously there's challenges, because you can be the president, but you've got a Congress and you've got policies and people who are invested, and their congressional districts are invested in keeping things the way they are. And
keeping things the way they are.
Right. And keeping that money flowing. So one thing that'll be very interesting to watch, and Trump has a lot of power over this, is the federal bureaucracy itself. Reports have been published showing that only 6% of federal employees, bureaucrats, show into the office every single day.
I didn't know it was that. I didn't know.
Yeah,
it was
very, very low number. So
where are they? Where are they?
Well, that's the stories that I could tell you. But let's just say that some of them are working part-time in the office, part-time at home, or are they working? Some of them have moved entirely away from where their office would be. So if they could be in the DC area in their office, but they're living in Michigan or New Mexico or California or Florida.
But they say job one is first day, get people back in the office.
Exactly.
Do we know here in New Mexico what percentage? Because I know when I'm calling a government agency and I hear the kids screaming in the background or the dog barking,
right.
I know they're not in the office. They're not.
Right.
Do we know?
The governor said she told them to get back into the office. I am suspicious of that in terms of what the numbers are and how that's really functioning.
Okay. But anyways, thank you. Federally, 6% is shown are not in the office.
Right.
Trump says day one, get back in the office.
And that could result in people who are saying, well, I can no longer do that, or I no longer want to move back to the DC area.
I don't want to work.
Yeah, so maybe they want a different job. Great. Well, that's a great opportunity to right-size the federal bureaucracy. Save money for the taxpayers, which that seems to be a very high priority this time around, and I hope that it is. So there's a lot of ways in which the Trump administration can pull back on some of the federal spending. There's going to be debates over all manner of it. Medicaid, federal installations. Are we going to see New Mexico impacted by maybe even military cuts or cuts to the national labs? I don't know, but it's possible that would happen.
But you said, and it's right, I think you said New Mexico receives a higher percentage of federal dollars compared to any other state. And some people go, yay, we get all this federal money. But I think people keep forgetting, people who pay taxes are paying for this. So it's really not, yay, we're getting money. Yay, we're spending a lot of money.
Well, I would also add that New Mexico's biggest single challenge, as I see it, is its lack of human resources, human capital. We have lots of money, and we'll talk about the oil and gas industry, I'm sure, but we have lots of money right now. We have a limit on the amount of people who are of working age, and we're seeing younger people who have left the state. Birth rates are way down. All of those issues, we need to redeploy, if you will, the people who are working in these federal jobs back into, I'm going to say it, productive society. Not that everybody in the federal government is doing something that's not worthwhile, but I'm going to go with 75, 80% of the federal government could be, and we would be A-okay as a society in the federal government and doing what we need, not what the politicians have done for years and years and years, and just nobody's ever said no. So
nobody has said no.
Right.
Bring the bacon back to your state. That's what they worked on, and that's what people thought they wanted. Yay, we get all this money, but nobody has said no. So we could be having some no's.
Now, on the flip side, obviously, losing those federal dollars could be a real problem for New Mexico. Those people don't have to stay in New Mexico. There are many opportunities in many other states. We've got a lot of people working in the labs and in these military installations who could travel to other states and obtain jobs and obtain probably higher paying jobs, because New Mexico is not a very friendly place for people to move and to live. It's one of the reasons we've seen the decline in families. Our population has been relatively stagnant compared to our neighbors, whether it's Texas, which is not very physically or geographically attractive. We're a far prettier state than Texas. Then you could go over to Arizona, which is equally beautiful. It's got the hot weather. If you like 120 in the summer, then Arizona is your place. But they also have much more free market-based policies. Even Colorado, the other kind of blue state of the Intermountain West, they have strict limits on their taxes and spending. And even though they've gone very progressive, they remain a more dynamic and attractive place to do business. We, in New Mexico, we've relied on the federal government forever, and we've now had this oil and gas rush of new funds that's enabled essentially the politicians to grow government and to pile up piles and piles of cash in accounts that are controlled by the state. We, the people, have not seen much in the way of that oil and gas money returned to us.
We're going to talk about that in another show, but also I asked a senator last year in the program, why don't we give, it's the oil and gas money, they pay the taxes, and we didn't need the money. Why not just, and I said badly, why not just give it back to them? And the senator said, do you know how much money they make? They were going to give it back to other people, citizens, as a rebate, but why not give it back to the people who paid the taxes? And that was very unpopular.
Politically, that is not on the table. In fact, our land secretary, our land commissioner, her top priority for a few years now has been to force the oil and gas companies to pay a higher, what's called a royalty rate on oil and gas that comes out of the ground. Now, we could debate that. That's an interesting proposition. Not all states are created equal when it comes to the taxes and fees paid to get the oil and gas out of the ground. So she's trying to imply that, we don't have them pay as much as Texas does.
Another tax.
But we have this gross receipts tax and other taxes which make it more difficult. I would be in favor of keeping that the same and giving the money back to New Mexicans, not in the form of, the Alaska Permanent Fund kind of procedure. I'm okay with that.
$2,000, I think, each taxpayer.
But we should be, Alaska also has no personal income tax and no sales tax. Once we do those kinds of things to develop businesses, to diversify our economy, and bring more human capital to our state, because people will move, people will come to our state, and people do move to the states that do not have a personal income tax, Texas being one of them, Florida being another. Not having to pay taxes on your income is incredibly attractive to individuals and businesses, and that's something that I would love to see happen. Not going to happen in this legislative session, not going to happen until we change what the people look like in Santa Fe in terms of their philosophy.
But we did not do that this last session, or this last election.
No.
We didn't do it.
The folks that we elected say, well, what we've been doing is going just fine. Whether the people are aware of what's happening or like what's happening, they got reelected. And if you get reelected, you say, people like the status quo. So they're going to
Even though
keep
the
doing.
people are they complain.
People complain, but if
Complain,
they
but they
don't get
voted,
out to
yeah.
the polls and vote
It's gonna be
for
the
the
same.
people that are
They're
changing
gonna be able to
the situation, they're going to keep doing the same thing.
Let's go back to the federal government where there was a
Absolutely.
change. Was a change.
Yep.
How is that going to affect? So, and I want to get back to the federal government and this, which you corrected me on, a $37 trillion deficit. Here in the state of New Mexico, we have a balanced budget, which is good. You take in the money, you can only spend what you take in.
Yeah.
Federally, no matter what party is in power at in the presidency or the House and the Senate,
Right.
they have that $1 trillion. I remember it was $2 trillion, the deficit. Then it was, then it grew to $37 trillion deficit that we have. And it keeps growing. And I'm not saying billion, I'm talking trillion.
So this is a little bit like turning around one of those massive super tankers in the ocean. Even if Trump did everything that I wanted him to do, this whole situation is going to take time and a lot of political courage and stick-to-itiveness. I don't know that that's a actual political term, but it's going to require some discipline in order to get us on a track to not necessarily paying off the debt in the near future, but just not accumulating more debt. One of the things that I'm excited about, in addition to kind of the DOGE and the approach on spending, is that America is now an energy superpower. Sorry, it keeps coming back to oil and gas. One of the things that Biden did, well, he eliminated the Keystone XL pipeline. We need permitting for the pipelines to take the energy from place to place, and America will become more energy dependent and more of a global player. Exporting, independent, yes, and more of an exporter of our energy, which means that that's money flowing into our state directly because it's New Mexico and our country. Another aspect of that is liquefied natural gas exports. We have a surplus of natural gas in the United States. It's what has grown our energy, electricity generation, and made us reduce CO2 emissions relative to the past and other nations. But exporting that can mean dollars in New Mexicans and Americans' pockets, driving the deficits and the debt down.
What did President Biden do to the natural gas industry?
He put a
pause?
pause on permits relating to exports. He didn't completely abolish exports. He just made it more difficult for us to grow that particular industry.
Because we couldn't export, so why produce things if you can't export it?
Yeah.
We're using it in our country, but there was enough.
Right. We have a surplus. Our prices in natural gas have been quite low for a long time. It helped mitigate against Russian influence in Europe because the Eastern European countries need our energy. It would help if we were serious about climate change. It'll help Asian countries like China burn natural gas instead of coal, cutting CO2 emissions. And of course, like I said,
they can produce it themselves, China?
China doesn't have as much natural gas and much energy. That's one of the kind of soft underbelly aspects of China and its economy, is that they're reliant on.
It's such a huge country. I'm surprised. Wow.
Yeah, we're very lucky here in the United States to have these. And also part of it is we have a free market economy that allows the experimentation and diversification and kind of the little experiments to see, oh, well, can we use the shale, which is what we're doing right now? That's why we have a boom in New Mexico. Can we use shale, which is kind of a rocky formation, to get that energy out of it? And that was something that was talked about for years and years back in the 70s and 80s, and finally the fracking process made that happen. And so now...
But couldn't they take those processes that we've developed here?
The Chinese steal our intellectual property all the time, and they could, but it's one thing to kind of have a roadmap. It's another thing to have the institutional and technical knowledge to actually
Let's get
do
back
the
to
job.
China and the tier. But back to what you shared with me, the $37 trillion will be hard to pay off.
It'll
deficit.
take generations.
But you're saying, John, really?
If we do well.
It was only one generation to get it to $37 trillion. I remember when it was $2 trillion.
Right. But as time goes by, you've got inflation, which is inevitable. So that $37 trillion will be less of a real factor. Our economy will grow. And if we were to just freeze that $37 trillion figure in amber
It would
for a
be easy.
decade,
It would be easy.
it becomes less and less of a factor.
okay.
The problem is that we keep piling up trillions in debt annually that adds to that trillions.
And you were saying that the deficit each year is about a
couple of $1 trillion, yeah, give
couple
or
of
take.
trillion that add to the 30s. Okay, so there's hope maybe that 2 trillion in the deficit each year could go down?
Absolutely. That is the hope right now, is that we're hoping we can start to eliminate
Balance
that. Yeah.
or eliminate that. So the biggest items in our federal budget are entitlements.
Those are Social Security, Medicare. Now, people often don't understand what Medicare is versus Medicaid. Medicare is specifically health care for the elderly. Medicaid is primarily for low-income people. However, the single biggest component of Medicaid, and the part that's growing the fastest, is actually health care for the elderly, because it's long-term care. It's when people are unable to care for themselves, they have to go into a facility. And a lot of them,
Medicaid.
A lot of them rely on
okay.
Medicaid for that. So Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and then defense. Defense spending is another big one. Now, Trump has said he's not going to touch Social Security and Medicare. He's also pro-military, but I've seen some rumblings and some statements from Elon Musk and others who are, I think, interested in right-sizing and making the military more efficient and effective with the resources it has, rather than spending a whole bunch of money. And one of the things that has happened in the past is a BRAC, base realignment and closure.
Oh, I remember we did that.
And that's a huge,
I've heard of
huge thing. It saves money. A lot of the military experts that you talk to say, yeah, we are overdue for another round. Basically, a BRAC, I have no insider information that New Mexico would be impacted by this, but we do have 3 major military bases right here. A BRAC means that you get a commission, they have a target for how much they want to save, they put a list together, and then Congress ultimately gives it an up or down vote. And it's one of the most effective ways to save money that this country's ever had. So is that a way that they could do things? Absolutely. Are there other ways that they can reduce?
So if he is not touching some of these entitlements, how are we going to save money?
That's a very, very important question. Medicaid, I think, is on the table, and we have the highest percentage of our population on Medicaid of any state in the country here in New Mexico. There are efforts that are going to be undertaken this session to expand Medicaid further into higher income levels, to put more New Mexicans on Medicaid. New Mexico gets something on the order of $4 from the feds for every dollar that we spend. So about like an 80% match.
They want people on it.
So that could be impactful in New Mexico. Okay. But again, these are a lot of people who I believe should be in the workforce, who oftentimes are sitting at home collecting government checks. So that is, I think, overall a positive. And you don't want to be stuck on Medicaid. That's not a good system for New Mexicans to be a part of.
Tariffs. How might President-elect Trump says tariffs, or maybe he's president by the time people are watching the show, he might impose tariffs to help build our economy here in our country.
So Trump has talked a lot about tariffs, and tariffs are ultimately just a tax on goods brought into this country. A lot of things we already buy are tariffed at a heavy rate. I think Trump's first and foremost working, and he's talked about Canada and Mexico and policies that he wants to see from those countries, and using tariffs as kind of a hammer. Now, what will the tariff plans actually look like, and how impactful will they be on the economy is anybody's guess. Since COVID, we've seen broadly a trend of manufacturing reshoring. Reshoring means that either it's coming back to the United States directly from other countries, or it's coming to maybe shorter supply chains like Mexico, like Canada, because China was a mess during COVID. They were locking down their entire country by real lockdowns. Of course, China is considered an adversary. They're a target for tariffs as well. So China is a unique case because of their geopolitical and their political rivalry with the United States. But broadly speaking, we've already been seeing kind of a shift away from China towards Mexico, towards other places. So the tariffs may not be as impactful as we might be fearing. And we'll see how it all shakes out. Trump is a negotiator. That's how he made his way to the presidency, The Apprentice, and his real estate empire. He likes to play that, kind of bully ball aspect of negotiation. And tariffs are something that these countries, when he says tariff, it's like jump. And
We're going to
say
listen.
how
We're
high.
going to listen now.
Yeah, they say how high.
Paul Gessing with the Rio Grande Foundation, the president. Got a minute left. What else would you like to share that you think was impactful from this election, and what could happen in 2025?
Well, I am optimistic that we will see some form of tax reduction with that oil and gas money. It is probably going to be very, very small. We still have $800, $900 million in surplus revenue coming in from that industry. We need to do something for the New Mexico people with that money. Not more government, not stick it in savings accounts. We need some tax reductions. On the flip side, Trump's pro-energy policies could have an unforeseen impact of driving down energy prices because he unleashes the American energy industry, and we see a flood of oil and gas, and that could cause prices to drop, which could affect New Mexico's revenue picture. It'll affect our bottom line very well because prices at the pump should go down.
And products and everything else.
And
transportation of delivering the products. So there's hope. We're going to have you back talking about the legislative session and all that $800 million, almost $1 billion new dollars, what we could do with it. But thank you for all that you do. Your voice, we can hear you on the radio. We appreciate you being a guest here at Issues and Answers on KCHF TV. So thanks for all the thoughts and your knowledge and imparting them and making it fun and entertaining. And thank you, viewers, for watching. I'm Diane Kinderwater, making a great year, 2025. Great year. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Issues and Answers with your host Diane Kinderwater is presented as a public service to inform, educate, and better the lives of New Mexicans. To comment on today's program, email us at info@kchftv.org or call us at 505-345-1991. Join us again for Issues and Answers with Diane Kinderwater.